Welcome to the She Speaks to Inspire podcast. I'm your host, Julia Kraft, your authentic expression mentor and public speaking coach. She Speaks to Inspire is an empowering public speaking podcast for women with public speaking fear. Unlike other podcasts on public speaking, She Speaks to Inspire not only gives you tips to be a confident communicator under pressure, but also helps you regulate your nervous system for less anxiety, learn lifestyle practices to reduce burnout and overwhelm, and reconnect with your feminine leadership presence for more authenticity and comfort in your skin. I believe it's the quiet ones, especially the quiet women, who have the most important ideas. I believe the world really does need your voice. So let's dive in. Welcome back to the She Speaks to Inspire podcast. I'm your host, Julia Kraft, and we are going to talk today about one of my favorite topics. I could totally geek out on this all day long, all the time, but we're just going to spend a few minutes talking about it, and hopefully it'll be helpful to you. In general, if you're getting value from the She Speaks to Inspire podcast, it would mean the world to me if you took a moment to follow the podcast and give us a review so that other women like you can find the inspiration and support they need to be more fully expressed. Today we're talking about the secret power of nonverbal communication. And I say that it's secret because a lot of people are not really aware or conscious or purposeful with how they use their nonverbal communication. And as you'll discover today, nonverbal communication is incredibly powerful. What is nonverbal communication? Well, there's so much to it. It really is a whole language, like we say, body language. It's like learning a whole nother language, but the good news is that you already speak it, even if you're not aware that you do. Some examples of nonverbal communication are your gestures, your eye contact, your facial expressions, your posture, how you walk and move, how you take up space, use the space, your vocal tonality, your pitch, your pacing, your vocal resonance. We talked about that in another podcast, and so much more, including even what you wear or the environment that you're in. It's contributing to someone's perception of your nonverbal communication. In our modern internet-based world, where a lot of life is on a screen and we become 2D visuals on video or in a picture, it's easy to lose track of what's happening within your own body and what nonverbal communication you're giving out. And it's just as easy to become hyper self-conscious of how we look, how we're coming across, and to sometimes put on a show or a mask, like a fake persona, through our nonverbal communication. Let's talk today about the power of nonverbal communication in your speaking and high-stakes communication moments, and how you can improve your relationship to your nonverbal communication so that overall your speaking is more effective and you both feel more confident and come across as more confident. Like I said, this is a huge topic, so we're just going to touch on the surface of it today. If you know that you want more support and more personalized guidance around nonverbal communication, a great next step is to head over to speaktoinspire.com, register for the masterclass there, go deeper with me in that class, and then if it feels right to you, join the Fully Expressed program where I can give you one-on-one mentorship and support around improving your speaking skills, confidence, and nonverbal communication. Most of us think of speaking and communication as being about the words, the message, the information. This is why you might spend hours, weeks, days preparing your content, scripting it out, thinking it through, agonizing around getting it right. It's very common to think that what I say is the most important thing, and I need to know exactly what to say. I need to make sure to say the right thing. There's some truth in that, and any good PR person out there would tell you saying the right words makes a difference. However, it's not the whole story. See, a message is only as good as it is received. A message is only as good as it is received. You can sit by yourself in your office, creating the perfect PowerPoint and the perfect script according to you. But then there you are in the real live moment of delivering that message, delivering that presentation to your audience. And again, that message is only as good as it is received by the audience in that moment. When it comes to how a message is received, that's really more about the nonverbal communication, the how it's spoken. And this is where we get into the power, the secret power of nonverbal communication, because it's been proven in many, many studies that nonverbal communication is more impactful than verbal communication. To simplify that, how you say something is more important than what you say, especially when you're being heard or seen, as in, talking to someone on the phone or communicating over Zoom with a video on, or of course in person. That's when nonverbal communication really comes into play. Though that being said, even if you're writing an email, a text, a letter, does anybody write letters anymore? Even if it's written communication, tone is still everything. And that's a whole nother topic in terms of how we get across tone, intention, and nonverbal communication in between the lines with our writing. Let's focus on spoken communication for today. Perhaps you've heard me mention the Dr. Fox study before. This is an amazing study that was originally done in the late 1970s. It's been redone several times since then because the results were so incredible. And the results keep being very similar over and over again as they do this study throughout the years. In the original study, what they did was they brought in 2 speakers and a large audience. The first speaker was a doctor, PhDs, years and years of experience in his field, and he got up on stage behind a podium and gave a talk on what he's known for, what he's an expert in. He had a script in front of him, and he more or less read from the script. Now, what can you imagine his nonverbal communication was like? Yeah, if you're imagining that it was sort of flat, serious, formal, perhaps even you could go as far as saying boring. Yes, he's very intellectual. He's approaching it from the angle of the information is the most important thing. Whereas our second speaker was an actor that they hired to read a few articles of our real doctor and present on what he knew. Now, of course, he didn't have as much depth of knowledge. How could he? But what do you think was different about the nonverbal communication of how he presented in the moment to the audience? If you're imagining a more charismatic, dynamic speaker, then you're right on. The actor was walking around the stage, looking the audience in the eye, full of energy and range with his expression. After both speakers had spoken, the audience was given a survey. Who did you like more? Who did you trust more? Who did you think was more knowledgeable? And what was it about the speaker that gave you that impression? I think they chose. If you said the actor, then you're right. Overwhelmingly, the audience thought the actor was more likable, more knowledgeable, if you can believe that, and more trustworthy. And more specifically, what they were responding to in the speakers was 93% nonverbal communication. 93%, which means that just 7% was the actual words that the speaker was saying. Like I said, this study's been done many times over, and it's always between about 85% and 93% is nonverbal communication. Now, when they broke this down, it was 55% of the speaker's body language that the audience was responding to. So what the audience could see in the speaker's body, their gestures, their movement, their position of their spine, their eye contact, their facial expressions, etc. And 38% of what the audience was responding to was the sound of the speaker's voice, the pitch, the tempo, the volume, etc. When we're on the phone with someone, of course, those numbers change with an emphasis on what the audience can hear, the vocal communication. But isn't this interesting that the nonverbal communication influenced the audience so strongly? Are you surprised, or does this seem like expected? Let me ask you a poignant question. When you prepare for your upcoming presentations or meetings, do you spend 93% of your time preparing your nonverbal communication for a presentation? Or do you spend 93% of your time preparing your verbal communication, i.e. the content of your presentation? I bet most of you said, well, yeah, I spend 93% of my time or more preparing what I'm going to say, right? That's common. And it's one of the biggest things that I support women to shift in how they relate to their speaking, because one of the things that might be holding you back and creating more performance anxiety, nerves, fears around speaking for you is the perfectionism around your content. This puts you right up in your head. I talk about this in all the podcasts. It puts you into a place of getting it right or wrong and keeps you from focusing on the connection with the audience. So if you get nothing else from this episode, I hope that you get to shift away from over-focusing on your content and to start getting curious around, well, what would I do to prepare my nonverbal communication, to warm myself up, to get my body ready, my voice ready, my energy ready, what would I even do for that? Like, just get curious, be open to that. Are you willing to explore a new way of preparing for your speaking that might be more impactful for an audience, as well as more impactful for you to feel confident and calm? Another important statistic to keep in mind here is the statistic around first impressions. Have you heard that one? Again, there's been many studies on the brain activity around when we meet someone new. Generally, the statistics are within 5 to 7 seconds, we've made a judgment of someone. We've formed a first impression of someone upon first meeting them. 5 to 7 seconds. Woof. That is fast, right? Where do we get that information? Is it from what they say? No. It's from nonverbal communication. Within 5 to 7 seconds or less, when you meet somebody new, when you see someone new, when you hear somebody new, you pick up all the information that you need to form an impression through their nonverbal communication. The sound of their voice, the way their body looks, the way they move, the way they look at you or don't look at you, what they're wearing. This all adds up to an impression amazingly fast. And yes, there is generally a lot of bias and judgment in that first impression. If you're speaking to a large audience, say at a conference, I know you'd prefer to think that nobody's judging you and you don't want to worry about what people think of you. And I do want you to worry less about that. However, the reality is we all make first impressions of each other within 5 to 7 seconds. It's in your best interest to be aware of and conscious of and purposeful with the first impression that you make. Instead of letting that get to you in terms of self-consciousness, how could you have fun with being intentional around your first impression? Of course, after those first 5 to 7 seconds, we're still forming impressions of each other. We're still gathering information and making judgments and figuring out what we think of each other. That's an ongoing thing as we listen, as we watch someone speak. And again, we're gathering that information mostly from nonverbal communication, 7% or so from their words. Something that you could try that could help you to bring more awareness, self-awareness to your own nonverbal communication is, have you ever watched a video of yourself speaking without the sound on and with it muted? Say you record yourself doing a meeting. Just mute the meeting, mute the sound. Notice the story that you're telling with your body. What's the impression that you have of yourself? You can also do this with other speakers. Watch a TED Talk with the sound muted. What's the story? What's the impression? What's the feeling that you get from the body language? And then also try the opposite, which is that you listen to yourself leading a meeting, doing a presentation. Maybe you turn the light down on your computer and you just listen, or turn your phone over and just hear it. Try not to get too caught up in what you're saying, in the details of the content. That is a common trap. But listen to the sound of your voice, almost like it's a song. Listen to the lilting of your voice, the up and down roll of the pitch, the pacing. What's your impression of yourself? And similarly, you can do this even with my voice now. As you listen to my voice, what do you feel about what you hear in the sound of the voice? As opposed to the content itself, how is the sound, the rhythm, the intonation, the resonance affecting you? This is just the beginning of being aware of the power of nonverbal communication, which is an important first step. And then once you're aware of it, you've opened Pandora's box, because then we can really start to play. Nonverbal communication is an art, not a science. Sure, you can learn best practices. You can learn those all over YouTube. You can learn them in your local public speaking training. But the mastery of nonverbal communication comes when you understand how to connect with your audience and connect with your inner authenticity at the same time, and allow your body to be fully expressed, and allow your body and your voice to be fully expressed. This is exactly why I called my program the Fully Expressed program, because it's not about being the perfect, polished speaker. That's not how I approach speaking. I want my women to allow a full expression through their body and their voice so that the audience more fully receives their message. When your nonverbal communication is not fully expressed, it's almost like there's static over top of the radio station. You know, when you're searching for the channel and you can't quite get it clear and there's that staticky sound, that's what an audience feels like when your nonverbal communication is not fully supporting your message. It's a little uncomfortable to listen to. They don't even know why. But it is within your power to tune the station to that clear sound so that they can receive the message, hear the song clearly. It really takes some self-awareness as well as some outside expert feedback, because you can never see yourself as other people see you. And that's why I suggested earlier on in the podcast episode that if this is something you really would like to master, if it's something that, if you would really like to improve your nonverbal communication, your first impressions, and your impact on those that listen to you, it's very important to get that expert outside feedback and support and guidance. And so a great next step would be to head over to speaktoinspire.com, register for the masterclass. You'll learn more about all this there. And then at the end of the masterclass, you can learn more about the Fully Expressed program and see if it makes sense to get started. It would be my pleasure to support you on this journey. I hope this was helpful for you to think about your speaking differently and start to bring some self-awareness and clarity to how you're showing up. The world needs your voice. Go out and speak to inspire. Thanks for listening. This has been She Speaks to Inspire with Julia Kraft, your authentic expression mentor and public speaking coach. I'm so glad you joined me. And I hope you got so much out of this episode. If you want to learn more about Speak to Inspire training programs and get inspired, head over to speaktoinspire.com or follow us on Instagram at She Speaks to Inspire. Never forget, the world needs your voice, and it's time for you to speak to inspire. See you in the next episode.